I want to know from you, first of all, give us a description of Venezuela under Nicolas Maduro, who we know was the vice president under Hugo Chavez. I met Chavez once. I think you knew him well. I interviewed him once. He was an extraordinarily charismatic character. Maduro has not been charismatic, but he has been brutal. So paint us a picture of Venezuela under Maduro.
So, well put, well laid out, Matt. So from 1999 until 2013, Chavez took Venezuela and really Latin America and part of the world by storm. This incredibly charismatic former paratrooper, left of center, became, glommed onto Fidel Castro, who became his mentor, benefited from a huge surge in oil prices in the early 2000s that lasted until about 2013. He tried to do a lot, declared himself to be a socialist, alienated the United States, but always managed to do so with a good sense of humor and so on. Then he succumbed to cancer and died, and anointed Nicolas Maduro, his sort of able-bodied right-hand man of the street, a bit like him, except without a military background, but from the left wing, and a Cuban cadre himself. He was trained in Cuba, he was ideologically of the left, and he took over in 2013, so 12 years ago, almost, a couple of months down the road from now. And almost about the same time Maduro takes over, the oil prices drop precipitously. And a combination of mismanagement, the fact that Venezuelans, not necessarily Maduro's fault, had no real other economy other than the export of oil. The country just went to hell in a handbasket, as Americans like to say. And since then, about a third of the population, maybe as many as half, have fled the country in the most noisome exodus from any country in the Western Hemisphere that really the West has known. Many as 8 to 9,000, a million, Venezuelans have fled into all of the neighboring countries.
It is that many.
And to the United States.
Yeah.
That many. And so you have a country that Maduro has managed differently to Chavez, like you pointed out. He has shown more willingness to unleash police forces, paramilitary forces, throw people in jail. People have died in jail. People have been tortured. There is a kind of a lumpen slum-dwelling class that is wedded to the Chavista, as they call it, experiment, the idea of revolution, that have been a bit like Iran's Basiji, these paramilitary revolutionary guards. There's been an effort to emulate that in Venezuela. How powerful they are and how loyal they truly are to the idea of the revolutionary land is an open guess at this point, because everyone, including them, have been ground down a lot over the past decade because of the economic situation. Maduro is no Chavez, but he is also quite charismatic. He was very clumsy in the beginning, but he does have charisma. He does have personal charisma. He is streetwise. He's
tall.
Now, he's very tall. He's about 6'4", I'd say, and a good, 14 stone or something. He's a big guy. He'll break into a dance and a song if he wants to, and often does. To show the last time I saw him, he went over to a glass case in his office and pulled out a sword and started waving it around and said, "This was Bolivar's sword," Simón Bolívar, the 19th century Libertador. And he has as many Venezuelans do, has a kind of mystical quality to him, and I think traditionally Venezuelan leaders play with that. Venezuelans are they have a lot of saints and spirits not canonized by the Catholic Church. And that idea of Santeria and cannily Chavez and also Maduro have played with that a lot. Yeah. So the fact that he's lasted until now, despite everything, and has sort of given up a lot of the former strictures of as suggested by the Cubans, who are much more disciplined, about politics or economy. And it's become a place where you can kind of, if you have money, you can be all right. If you don't have money, you're on the make. That's the Venezuela today. So an oil country typically doesn't have deep-seated political ideology,
Sure.
you know, and we'll see how much of a resistance is put up by the people who haven't been hauled away by the Americans. You know, some very powerful people have been left behind, including the head of the army and the hardest man of the regime, Diosdado Cabello, who has a series of paramilitary loyalists that could be called upon to act as a kind of revolutionary guard.
Right. So just on that point then, do you think then that any talk of regime change is lazy? And of course, you know, we haven't heard that much of it from the Trump administration overtly. I mean, that's what they may want. But if you look at the guys who are still in charge, you know, the hard man that you just described, the fact that the military forces have been pretty well paid off, and they know that they might end up in a shallow grave, you know, if someone else takes over. Then you've got Maria Corina Machado, you know, who's on the sidelines. If you put all those jigsaw bits together, what do you get?
A mess.
Yeah,
you get a mess. I mean, there's several options the way I see it right now. We see more shock and awe type bombing from the Americans. They're waiting to see if the vice president, who has also come out against what's happened, Delcy Rodriguez, she and her brother are a kind of tag team, very, very influential and not unknown to the Americans. They have been the people that have been negotiated with behind the scenes for some time. And then there's the hard men, as I mentioned, Diosdado and Vladimiro Padrino Lopez, the head of the army, who would not be part of any American solution. One possibility, I think, is that the Americans, who may well have Maria Corina Machado, the Peace Prize winner, and they could declare her the legitimate president of Venezuela.
But with what effect?
From the decks of the, you know, what is it, the Eisenhower?
USS Gerald Ford, the Gerald Ford.
Or they take a piece of Venezuelan turf and do so. With, of course, her straw man, you know, frontman, Edmundo Gonzalez, who actually ran in the so-called stolen election for her. And they declare her the legitimate president of Venezuela, and they ask for the others to leave the country, that they have 48 hours to leave the country, or they give them a safe exit.
Do you think any of that will work? I mean, you know, and on the downside, you know, worst case scenario, could we even end up with some kind of civil war in Venezuela?
Look, at the moment, I would say all things are possible. We could be talking about the United States, couldn't we, Matt? Look, this is such an unpredictable regime. I'm speaking about the American one, that, and we've seen so much of it is performative, which I think is why people are surprised at actually seeing bombs drop in Caracas. I would imagine that this is a kind of probe. Trump, of course, will crow victory. But where do we go from here? I'm not really sure. You know, the Americans have a past history in invading countries and then leaving their dictators in place. And in other cases, I'm thinking of Saddam Hussein, 1990, and then, of course, also kidnapping the president and putting him in prison, as they did with Noriega.
Yeah. I mean, the other interesting thing is that, and maybe this is, you know, I've had the wrong kind of breakfast this morning, but, you know, Trump and Maduro have had a strange telephone relationship, haven't they? They almost seem to be flirting with each other. You know, one day Trump says, I talked to the guy and I read him the riot act. The next day he's saying, you know, and we might be able to make a deal here. And I'm bringing up the height because Trump is impressed by people who are tall, and he doesn't like people who are taller than him. I'm sure they won't be appearing next to each other for that very reason, right? Because Trump never wants to stand next to someone who's taller than him, and that's maybe why he's got a problem with the German Chancellor right now. But is it possible that he might even, you know, end up, I don't know, pardoning Maduro at the end of all this, as he did with the Honduran president who was in jail, the former president? I mean, tell me.
Well, I mean, look. So it's such crazy times that I wouldn't even put it. Look, I think it's unlikely, but there could have even been a deal with Maduro and his wife. Yeah. Judging from Maduro's face in the picture we've seen, under, you know, flanked by guards, he looks fairly sullen. I don't think so, but let's say that he and his wife, they got him out, and that only the hard guys are left. Well, that could be. Look, you know, anything's possible right now. Okay. I would say. Including the possibility of a very messy backwash with fighting. So let's see.